Chapter 26 of The Valley of Silent Men. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Roger Moline. The Valley of Silent Men by James Oliver Curwood. Chapter 26. A little later, clasping hands in the lampglow, Kent and Sandy McTrigger stood alone in the big room. In their handclasp was the warm thrill of strong men met in an immutable brotherhood. Each had faced death for the other. Yet this thought, subconsciously and forever a part of them, expressed itself only in the grip of their fingers and in the understanding that lay deep in their eyes. In Kent's face the great question was of Marette. McTrigger saw the fear of it, and slowly he smiled, a glad and yet an anxious smile, as he looked toward the door through which Marette and the older woman had gone. "Thank God you have come in time," he said, still holding Kent's hand. "She thought you were dead. And I know, Kent, that it was killing her. We had to watch her at night. Sometimes she would wander out into the valley. She said she was looking for you. It was that way tonight." Kent gulped hard. "I understand now," he said. "It was the living soul of her that was pulling me here. He took his pack with its precious contents from his shoulders, listening to McTrigger. They sat down. What McTrigger was saying seemed of trifling consequence beside the fact that Marette was somewhere beyond the other door, alive, and that he would see her again very soon. He did not see why McTrigger should tell him that the older woman was his wife. Even the fact that a splendid chance had thrown Marette upon a log wedged between two rocks in the chute, and that this log, breaking away, had carried her to the opposite side of the river, miles below, was trivial with the thought that only a door separated them now. But he listened. He heard McTrigger tell how Marette had searched for him those days when he was lost in fever at Andre Boileau's cabin, how she had given him up for dead, and how in those same days Laselle's brigade had floated down, and she had come north with it. Later he would marvel over these things, but now he listened, and his eyes turned toward the door. It was then that McTrigger drove something home. It was like a shot piercing Kent's brain. McTrigger was speaking quietly of O'Connor. He said, "But you probably came by way of Fort Simpson, Kent, and O'Connor has told you all this. It was he who brought Marette back home through the Sulphur Country." O'Connor! Kent sprang to his feet. It took McTrigger but a moment to read the truth in his face. "Good God! Do you mean to tell me you don't know, Kent?" he whispered tensely, rising in front of the other. "Haven't you seen O'Connor? Haven't you come in touch with the police anywhere within the last year? Don't you know?" "I know nothing," breathed Kent. For a space McTrigger stared at him in amazement. "I have been in hiding," said Kent. "All this time I have been keeping away from the police." McTrigger drew a deep breath. Again his hands gripped Kent's, and his voice was incredulous, filled with a great wonder. "And you have come to her old home, believing that Marette killed Kedsty." "It is hard to believe. And yet—" Into his face came suddenly a look of grief, almost of pain, and Kent, following his eyes, saw that he was looking at a big stone fireplace in the end of the room. "It was O'Connor who worked the thing out last winter," he said, speaking with an effort. "I must tell you before you see her again. You must understand everything. It will not do to have her tell you. See—" Kent followed him to the fireplace. From the shelf over the stonework McTrigger took a picture and gave it to him. It was a snapshot, the picture of a bare-headed man standing in the open with the sun shining on him. A low cry broke from Kent's lips. It was the great gray ghost of a man he had seen in the lightning flare that night from the window of his hiding place in Kedsty's bungalow. "My brother," said McTrigger chokingly. "I loved him. For 40 years we were comrades. And Marette belonged to us, half and half. It was he who killed John Barkley." And then, after a moment in which McTrigger fought to speak steadily, he added, "And it was he, my brother, who also killed Inspector Kedsty." For a matter of seconds there was a dead silence between them. McTrigger looked into the fireplace instead of at Kent. Then he said, "He killed those men, but he didn't murder them, Kent. It couldn't be called that. It was justice, single-man justice, without going to law. If it wasn't for Marette, I wouldn't tell you about it, not the horrible part of it. I don't like to bring it up in my memory. It happened years ago. I was not married then, but my brother was 10 years older than I and had a wife. I think that Marette loves you as Marie loved Donald. And Donald's love was more than that. It was worship. We came into the new mountain country, the three of us, even before the big strikes at Dawson and Bonanza. It was a wild country, a savage country, and there were few women in it. But Marie came with Donald. She was beautiful, with hair and eyes like Marette's. That was the tragedy of it. I won't tell you the details. They were terrible. It happened while Donald and I were out on a hunt. 3 men, white men, remember that, Kent, white men, came out of the north and stopped at the cabin. When we returned, what we found there drove us mad. Marie died in Donald's arms. And leaving her there, alone, we set out after the white-skinned brutes who had destroyed her. Only a blizzard saved them, Kent. Their trail was fresh when the storm came. Had it held off another 2 hours, I, too, would have killed. From that day, Donald and I became man-hunters. We traced the back trail of the 3 friends and discovered who they were. 2 years later, Donald found one of the 3 in the Yukon, and before he killed him, he made him verify the names of the other 2. It was a long search after that, Kent. It has covered 30 years. Donald grew old faster than I, and I knew, after a time, that he was strangely mad. He would be gone for months at a time, always searching for the 2 men. 10 years passed, and then, one day, in the deep of winter, we came on a cabin home that had been stricken with the plague, the smallpox. It was the home of Pierre Radisson and his wife Andrea. Both were dead. But there was a little child still living, almost a babe in arms. We took her, Donald and I. The child was Marette. McTrigger had spoken almost in a monotone. He had not raised his eyes from the ash of the fireplace. But now he looked up suddenly at Kent. "We worshipped her from the beginning," he said, his voice a bit husky. "I hoped that love for her would save Donald. It did, in a way. But it did not cure his madness, his desire for vengeance. We came farther east. We found this marvelous valley, and gold in the mountains, untouched by other men. We built here, and I hoped even more that the glory of this new world we had discovered would help Donald to forget. I married, and my wife loved Marette. We had a child, and then another, and both died. We loved Marette more than ever after that. Anne, my wife, was